My name is Robert Ashton Winslow. Thank you for coming. Because this is all an experiment. Basically, at the highest level, how to use the technology for what it's good for. This comes out of my program and first documentary series, Southern Dialogues, in 2014. It's really about the experience of American democracy today. It feels like since before I was born, we were talking about declining voter participation or lacking efficacy or accountability to public management. And of course, the media environment that too often loses the realness or emphasizes aspects of ourselves that we don't want to see as our values. And that last might obviously be what's at interest here. But at what level is this a question for art? Well, we call it in our First Amendment, okay, freedom of expression, and that's what art means. Art is being free. Even as a medium, just to be able to ask the question, like, what is art? What is being free? Art has so many attempts to act out that question. This is being free. And the experience of art at its best is of having your own experience held up to you in a way that's even puzzling. That reflection is the truth of it. And even when that truth becomes cynical and you think, is it really? You call this freedom? Even then at its best, the experience of art is yes. And of course, the point at which that experience draws back from itself from what it's of, or what it holds up to us, and we can focus on what it is, where that's its content. Asking, does it qualify? Is this being free? We're too easy with that when it's about freedom from. Let's talk about freedom with. As democracy is being free together. It's the same problem as, or it's naively simple to think of being a free individual, but to be a free people? We even run up on that cynicism that says there is no freedom with. I think of virtue as saying there is no freedom without. It's kind of an ironic mix-up to isolate oneself in the mix and still be so demanding of experience. And again, I think of that cynicism that's so prevalent today as thinking that that yes is just to beauty and not to ourselves. The fundamental question in my work is civic trust, the credence, learning process, future orientation, very tied up in media now. For a while, people were talking like it was the end of the world. You know, like everything started with some sensational break and everything started to sound extreme. I think that was just recognizing, you know, things can't continue this way, or if things do continue this way, we don't see a future. Call it the condition of possibility. It's what's at stake and it's what's denied in political polarization. My question is, how can we all be in it together? Because we are all in it together. Back to this freedom with, so that one's sense of freedom isn't another's antipathy, or how do we not get to the point where that's the issue? To reaffirm the co-equality of citizens, because that's what political polarization represents the loss of. I first got this whole idea during the government shutdown in October 2013. Think of it this way. The consent of the governed comes from the trust we have in each other, enough to know that even if we don't cast the winning ballot, the decision made still represents our own will at some level. Not to get all philosophical, because what I'm talking about is pretty straightforward, right? By, for, and of the people. Civics means working out the social and the moral and the political and the economic and yes, aesthetic questions of our time through this principle of self-government that defines Americanism. Now, I do not feel qualified, and I am not really interested in litigating who or what is right, because truth will out. I believe in us. I trust us, so long as we're in it together. But that is the question. For myself, I've always found more value in calming down and figuring out little bits that could actually help and keeping up the good work. But these are conversations we need to have. And as a young American, I have to say our future depends on it. That we be honest and serious with each other, and that these conversations have us lead ourselves as we build our way into the future. This is not political. This is civic. So at my most provocative, I hope I'm just phrasing a concrete question. Do we believe in democracy? Do we believe in ourselves? Do we believe in each other? We need to act like it. My work is so many attempts to beat honest and serious like that, and why abstractly it's about political polarization. Because polarization makes the answer to each of those questions no. It's the point at which the condition of possibility for democracy is denied, where we refuse any future together. And when I say polarization, sure, I mean the big sensational divides that are the stuff of our politics, but no. I'm talking about this way we have of relating to each other, or to the question, that is always trying to separate ourselves. I think polarization is what happens when social distance becomes self-reinforcing. When sensing certain kinds of difference with someone sets you off in your own direction. And in a way, it represents when the craving for fundamental issues to be addressed turns malignant, is how I've come to see it. We come to feel we're only even able to express ourselves when the person hearing us already agrees. Which is where it comes back to art and being free. Again, the First Amendment and the priority of these basic social institutions where we join our experience with that of others, and which political polarization represents the breakdown of. I think this is absolutely a question for art. And again, this is my experiment. Because wherever you ask about polarization as a theme in American life today, that's one of the first things that comes up is the media. And when we say the media, we're usually referring to TV news when we mean what used to be called the Fourth Estate. Superficially, it's all of the communication apparatus, right? From script, cable, to Snapchat. But what we're really talking about is the content structure, where social and cultural values are turned over into talking points and images and character relationships. And that reaches very deep. I think about a spectrum where you have information or journalism, entertainment, and art. And they all feed each other's curiosity, but we've gotten very bottom-heavy with that middle term, and now neither can venture very far from entertainment. And you think about how big documentary is today, that's just art and journalism meeting each other back up the spectrum. And when I say entertainment, too, I mean it in the old sense of diversion, right? Otherwise, I feel like we're just talking about it in terms of content, where the point is to drive eyeballs, drive traffic. You're not monetizing attention so much as creating market dependencies and then doubling down constantly. And it's become our whole approach to new media, right? Predicated on dividing attention. We are broken up and baited and pandered to, so that even when spaces of conversation are made, we depend more and more on this kind of pre-existing agreement, or else disagreement becomes purely sensational and expression takes on the character of trolling. Again, this is built into the new media environment. And in the same way as art is being free, let's say media is having social value. In consumer culture, we place a very high value on entertainment, on diversion. In politically polarized society, with all of its disruptions and contradictory explanations and recurring controversy, maybe the most important value is having a side and being right, you know? And when it comes to political media, that's the product, selling being right. Sometimes it's about taking a side on whatever question. Sometimes it's just about not being a sucker, you know, being savvy or aloof, which is at least explicitly cynical. And that's the main takeaway from these market transformations that have created the media, is that there is major profit in divisiveness. I've got a McLuhan quote over there, and you might associate this whole effect as being part and parcel with digital in the technology, right? With binary in the technology. Everything is yes, no, union, division, all or nothing. But the whole context of all of this talk about media and life on social media and always on is that we are just constantly, drastically rearranging cognitive capacity in the way that we experience and live our lives. This is absolutely a question for art, because media and creativity itself even has become all about craft, technique, you know. And we are the product. And dividedness as polarization between individual relations and whole world ideas. We are the product in this forced selection that's imposed on every social decision. Are you for it or against it? Everything must go. That one-dimensional polarity where you have yes, no, union, division, all or nothing. And when you don't see yourself immediately reflected in the whole thought process, then you just end up looking for reasons for the no. When it comes to the psyche in American life, think about what blame is. So much is going wrong. All of these crucial social decisions that we're fudging. And so many people that I talk to genuinely don't feel that democracy or self-government is allowed or even worth the effort. And meanwhile, we're talking about who's at fault. Who knows if it isn't too late already anyway, right? So what is civic life in America today? Where is virtue? So that's one core theme in my work, is articulating the yes, union, e pluribus unum, right? Asking, do you believe in democracy? And that we're all in it together and making a better future? And then if the answer is yes, then why? And what is polarization, do you think? Because the whole point of this is that we have the technology. Anybody can reach anybody or everybody and be an artist, be a journalist, be outspoken, put out an idea. And so the whole point, as I see it, is actually our ability to receive what each other has to say, our ability to listen. So that's the second core theme, is listening. And the third is that this is just me. Just having these conversations and making video essays. Thinking about ways to turn it into a different kind of media business. Being honest, right? And there are two things on that. One is that the price of entry has collapsed. We all know. And crowdfunding is a different story. You know, sure, I'm 25 years old. Lucky me. I can borrow my mother's truck for a year with borrowed camera equipment and be doing this. But the whole idea is just to listen. Asking for this conversation. Everything I care to say, I just said. It's just that the price of entry has collapsed and suddenly the price of compromise is too high. But that's about as cynical as I get. The other is that what would you bet there is such a demand for it? Documentary is huge right now, and I'll get to that in a second in case that's what you thought I was actually going to talk about. And if there really is such profit to be made from divisiveness or defensive or an offensive reasoning to drive traffic, then what would you bet there's a good secondary market to be had in unity or in human engagement across social difference in a way that increases spaces for action? The mutual recognition that is creative of social value as opposed to transactional. Huge demand. Especially when such a theme of our pop culture right now is historicizing this moment. Like, our whole situation is unprecedented. And because we want connection, we want to be heard and to get a sense of agency. So it's like I said, how do we get honest and serious about it? That's documentary as a democratic form. Because when you sit down to watch a YouTube video or a doc, literally what you're doing is taking that time to listen to someone, to listen to this story, this issue, this other side of life. And it's a safe space for that, to learn each other. Seriously, communication is a learning process, and listening is a learning exercise. And talking about all of these divides, we've learned how to separate ourselves and how to polarize. The solution to that is not unlearning. It's better, new learning, being conscious. And when I say media based on civic virtue, isn't that what the fourth estate used to be? And I'm not talking about more layers of highfalutin. I'm talking about just not being a cynical douchebag. Because that's what it comes down to. Here, using the technology for what it's good for. And being free with each other. So the experience of art is yes. And art as social commentary can get the same response as any social commentary in a polarized space, where it either invokes counterpoints or it gets the one-word caption when somebody reposts it. This. And that's not what I do. What I do is just go around and have these conversations with literally everybody that I can. Look for these stories where the future is opening up, right? Where the future is taking shape. The changes in our society. And being, yes, honest and serious, just turning that into video essays for anybody who's interested. Anything I put out is only ever part of a conversation we're all already having, just not with each other enough, is how I feel. Because just like good art holds your own sense of truth up to you, sometimes it's the external encounter with something that's at work in you, but that you haven't actually internalized yet. And as change comes faster, or we multitask, or whatever, that becomes the norm. And we put more and more emphasis on storytelling, or trauma, or tone. And that's all important. I'm just talking about this quality of human connection, to have someone sit down in front of you and open up, facing you, and for you to be able to receive that and hear what they're saying and where they're coming from. And I hope that it's just harder to hate on somebody when you can do that. And having heard some of a conversation like that, maybe in real life, it's easier to pick up parts of it with people. To hold up that space for a shared future. Because I believe in us. I really do. Except if we're just always shutting each other out all the time. I've said it 100 times. I'll say it 1,000,000. It's the best words for it. Okay, democracy means listening to each other and working together. And political polarization is the inability to do that. We can do much better, each of us, in our own lives and in our leaders, to rebuild trust and build a real future together. And like I said, this is just an experiment. So I hope we can all have a conversation.